ladies are out there looking after him. Two young people with you.
Tēnā tātou. E ngā mana i ngā reo, e rauranga tira maha tēnei te mihi kia tātou, e hui tahi nei, e pūhia nei te hau, ua hia nei te ua, e whitia nei te rā. Assembled by gentle breezes, moistened by a wee bit of rain, to be warmed by the sun yet to come.
Tanya. Can you sing that again, please?
Now that you've got music accompaniment.
We've got thunderstorm warnings.
You, Tanya?
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is. Yay.
Ako tā koe mihi kia tātou, e hui tahi nei. E maumahara hoki ki nā ngā mate, kai runga ki tēnā i o tata. Kai te hau kāinga, ka tahi kāmihi kātangi. A hoki mai rā ki a tātou te kanuhi ora, kai runga ki tēnei kaupapa, e hui rau mai rā i a tātou i te rangi nei, tēnei te mihi, tēnā koutou. Just in terms of the karakia, I just wanted to relate something in terms of the ritual that we do about karakia, and it's fit in terms of our council meetings, albeit this one here, the Regional Planning Committee. A quick story. My auntie, some of you would have known her name was Pareahili, Reverend Pareahili, Auntie Polly, and she was asked to open a hui back at home at Whakaki, and she did so on the behest of all of the people gathered, and straight after the karakia was done, everything turned terrible. People didn't speak well with one another. There were just terrible things that happened. At the end of the hui, they turned around to her and says, "Auntie, can you say a karakia to close our hui?" She says, "You do not deserve a karakia for your hui." And consequently, about turned and walked out of the room. What had actually happened, she says, the words that I said in my karakia that you all heard quickly flew out of the room and out of your minds in terms of the discussion that took place consequently. From that, there were a few things that were brought together, and this is one of the frameworks that has fallen out of that story and that experience from Auntie Polly's mahi as a reverend. She talked about the ISH framework, integrity, synergy and harmony. She says that under integrity, when we work with one another, if there's a degree of honesty, of trust, of respect and forgiveness, when we combine that with the way we behave around cooperation, collaboration and collectiveness, it produces some wonderful outcomes under harmony, about progress, about prosperity and about peace. I'm just going to ask Tom now if he could just do a page up. Here we go. So with that little story, I'm now going to say the words which are part of the karakia. You're welcome to join me. I'm going to go down the left-hand side, but you'll see a bit of what I'm actually saying on the right. Those of you who wish to join me, please do so. E tō mātou matui te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tae mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea tia tāu e pai ai ki ruka ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Ho mai kia mātou aia nei, he taroma mātou mō tēnei rā. Muru o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei I o te hunga e harana kia mātou. Aua hoki mātou e ka wea ke whakawaia, engari whakaorangi a mātou I te kino. Nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te karōria. Ake. Āmene, e aku rangatira tēnā tata.
Thank you, Patty. That was really excellent. Do we have any notices? Apologies.
Matthew.
Oh, Matthew. Register as an apology.
I just have to duck away just before 4 for 10 minutes.
Okay.
We'll be finished by then.
Have to go at 9.
Okay. Do we have someone to move to accept the apologies, please, Mr.
I'll move.
Api, Mr. Mahi, because you're being smart and second the apologies.
I'm going to leave.
All those in favour? All right, thank you. Do we have any conflict of interest in regard the matters on the agenda today? Haven't already been declared. No, we don't. I'd just like to say before we start off, I have you're not on my line of sight, you three. So if you got bang the old, or if you throw something at me, because I don't want to miss you, you know.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Does that apply to everyone else?
No. Actually, no, we move around there because these three I'm quite. Four I'm quite keen. But it's quite difficult. It's a fault in this meeting room, really.
It's a quiet corner anyway.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, so just let me know. Don't want to ignore you. So we have the minutes of the last meeting. I'm not going to go through. They are very extensive minutes, as you all would have found out when you read them. For correctness, Tora moves for correctness. Do we have a seconder? Uppy, thank you very much. All those in favour? Aye. The minutes are approved. Thank you very much. Follow-ups from the previous Regional Planning Committee meeting. Do we have any comments on those follow-ups?
So through you, Chair, just the first follow-up in terms of dates for Napier City Council's expected timeframe for the mapping work. Tonkin and Taylor have been commissioned to undertake this work, and they advise that this will be completed in March, and it will be not only be completed, it will be peer reviewed as well.
Thank you, Tom. Any other follow-ups? Someone move to approve that we've gone through the follow-ups. Mr. Paku's going to move for us. Thank you. Councillor Bailey. All those in favour? Aye. Minor items not on the agenda. Do we have any? Peter?
Status of unconsented feedlots in Hawke's Bay, including those on Māori land.
Well, that's a biggie. Thank you, Fiona. Any other? Peter, then Arpi?
Independent advice for the RPC.
Arpi?
I'm seeking a report with regards to the longfin tuna, which were found in the waterways in Napier about a month ago. HBRC conducted some tests, so I'm just looking for the results of those tests and an update on the cause of death of those 20 endangered species and number of fish.
Anyone? Any other? We have three minor items. Not minor, actually. They're all important. Okay, then we will move on. We'll accept those. And we're going straight into the tank plan change. Now, we have one decision item, which is item 6, but we also have 10 and 11. It's my thoughts to amalgamate all those together, so because they're all to do with tank, and as you would have noticed when you read them, they all connect. So I would like to amalgamate items 6, 10 and 11, and hand the floor over to you, Tom.
Look, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm just going to call Mary Ann Baker and Kerry up to the table. Look, it's a monster. It's a monster amount of work we've put in front of you, and I want to clip along at a recent pace. And given that you've noted my tendency to waffle, Chair, I've actually made it I've made a few notes. So if you just don't mind, if I might just speak to it.
I beg your pardon. You noted it, Tom. I denied. I said you didn't.
So if it's okay, I might just speak to a few notes just to introduce this paper, if it's okay, Chair. I just want to note that this paper and the decision that we're asking this committee to make today is a significant decision. It's a significant decision in the journey of the tank plan change, but I don't want to overstate the significance of the decision for this committee, because this decision, if we receive a favourable decision today, the process will be that then we will take this plan change out for consultation. We will take it to the affected iwi authorities. We will take it to the respective Crown agencies, and we will take it to the affected local authorities. We will take it out in the new year, and probably sometime, certainly not before the 18th of January.
Sorry, Tom. Just for clarity, are you talking taking it out to pre-consultation or to consultation? Or pre-notification or to consultation?
Absolutely everything in relation to this decision is to take it out for pre-consultation, pre-notification consultation. I'm going to stumble over that phrase a little bit in the next few minutes. Following that pre-notification consultation, we will, I can assure you, receive a mountain of feedback, which we will then bring back to this committee with further analysis, and then there will be further processes and evolution of the plan change, and then we will be asking this committee to make a decision to publicly notify the plan change, and it is our hope and expectation that we do that before the middle of next year. Even at that point, the plan change will then have to undertake the scrutiny of the public through the submissions and hearings process, which will be, again, significant and rigorous. And then even following that, the plan change is entirely subject to the judicial process, which only begins at the Environment Court. And so for that reason, while this is a significant step in the process, I don't want to overstate the significance of it for this committee, because you have a lot of work to do and many decisions to make in the future. But it would be remiss of me, while noting that it's not, while not wanting to overstate the significance for this committee, it would be remiss of me to understate the significance of this decision today for the community. One of the primary purposes of the Resource Management Act, which is so central to our own purpose, is that it generally leaves decision on how to manage resources to the local community. And so today's decision is significant because the tank plan change represents our most ambitious experiment in collaborative community processes, decision-making processes, and the simple fact that we are here today to consider the plan for pre-notification consultation means that for the community, this process can be considered a success. This committee has previously acknowledged and celebrated the members of the Tank Collaborative Group and Hawke's Bay Regional Council staffs and their many years of effort to reconcile social, cultural, environmental and economic values across biophysical domains for which we have imperfect knowledge in their own right, let alone their interaction with each other. I'm sure that having spent a considerable amount of time reviewing the work of the Tank Group, that this committee has a greater appreciation of why it took so long and why the inability of the Tank Group to reach 100% consensus on all issues cannot be regarded in any way as a failure. But Mr. Chair, what I do not want to understate today is my appreciation and the appreciation of my team and the rest of the organisation for the work of this committee. I think it's only fair to acknowledge that we brought this plan to you at a time when the committee was in deep crisis for reasons unrelated to tank, because this came to you in August. It would have been very easy for this tank process and therefore the community process to have been collateral damage as this committee worked through the internal challenges it faced at this time. But this committee resolved to set those differences aside for the tank plan change and the community it represented. This committee rolled up its sleeves and tackled the complexity of the issues that the Tank Group agreed on and the ever greater challenges presented by those issues for which consensus could not be reached. So the very fact that we're in a position to be considering this decision today means that the dual experiment of community collaborative processes and co-governance can be considered in this context a success. If I could perhaps just indulge myself for a second, Chair, I personally find this incredibly rewarding because of the number of times I've been assured that both experiments were destined to fail. Nowhere more so than the water conservation order process, where national bodies have not been restrained in their criticism, scepticism and cynicism, that our community and this council could create an integrated management framework that maintains or improves the freshwater resources of the tank catchment. So, Mr. Chair, regardless of its decision today, through you I would like to express the staff's gratitude to this committee for honouring and respecting the community process it initiated many years ago, for its patience for staff as we have over the past 5 months tried to summarise and condense 5 years of work, and the pragmatic approach taken by the committee in respect of its in-principle support so that we could continue progress through to today's decision. Consistent with the ongoing evolution of the plan, yesterday we received a suggestion from the Tangata Whenua reps, communicated via the technical advisors, that an addition of further content into the substance of the plan would be of great benefit to the plan. And we have circulated, and you have on your table, I believe, a copy of a two-page document that staff proposes inserted ahead of the objectives in the body of the plan change. Now, this document was produced overnight, and there may be further refinement, and I suggest that we will work at first instance with the technical advisors, but I think for the purposes of the recommendation that are going to be in front of you today, staff would like you to assume that these actually form part of the plan that you are recommending for pre-notification consultation. We welcome the suggestion, and we note that we believe it will be helpful through the consultation process to come. We also note that we have been provided with a succinct and objective and easy to understand summary of a range of issues and concerns that the Tangata Whenua reps have considered in terms of the tank plan change, and we believe that it is appropriate for that feedback to form part of the consultation process that we are going to go through, and that we can give the assurance that that feedback will then absolutely form part of the deliberation and discussions ahead of any decision to notify the plan change. So, Mr. Chair, I actually propose to hand this back to you at this stage. I mean, we have presented you with a significant amount of material, and we have the staff here available to respond to any questions. If you wish, we can take you through a very deep dive of the documents that we have provided you, or we can take you through a high-level summary of the documents, or we can simply just respond to questions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, for your very excellent address. It's well done, well said. Thanks, Marianne and Kerry, for being here to take questions. I think there was a substantial amount of documents people had to get through over the last week. Not only was it in volume substantial, but in complexity it was substantial as well. It had my head swirling at times, but I'm sure everybody. So I think we will go straight to questions on the document we had, and as Tom said, you can get into the areas of principle or detail. We have the staff here who are prepared to answer any questions. So, where do we start? Debbie.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just looking for a translation on po tiri ao, the top of the circle. Found all the other words in here, but can someone tell me what that is?
Tiri ao.
On top of this one.
Top of figure 2.
Talking about the
This
top
one.
of the name of it.
Collective group, does it?
They meet,
Yeah.
and discuss a lot of environmental issues.
But it's also a term that's related to a universal context. Potirio.
So would you put that in the translation? That'd be helpful.
I'm daunted by the silence.
Should I just make one comment, please? I'd just like to underscore the point that Tom made, which was this process was surrounded by naysayers, doomsayers, and every other negative you could ever find. No question about it. But despite all of that, it has arrived now on the edge of a decision to progress forward. And we should celebrate the fact that this is changing the process by which we undertake these plans. It was almost, in my view, a time of biblical proportions. The councils would come down off the mountains and hand out tablets of stones and say these are the plans are going to be, and the people just have to suffer them. Then they found courts and appeals and so on. We've turned that around, and the people now have gathered, and the people are working on this with the constraints and have come up with their ideas. And so these plans are now their plans, which give to us, and they become the council plans. This is a change in the way in which we make decisions. And I think we should celebrate this as a vote of confidence for the people within our region to resolve their own issues, to make the compromises necessary, to go on a journey themselves to get to a point where the people agree. And when you look around many other parts of the democratic institutions around the globe, they're flying apart. But here, in little Aotearoa Tonga, we've found a pathway where the people can meet together and find agreement. I think this is to be celebrated. This is not to be underrated. And I think, Tom, you did a wonderful job of understating what's been achieved here.
It's not quite achieved just yet, Councillor, but
I said
we're
perched on
11
the
hope.
edge.
Precipice on the edge. Are there any other questions? And
Mr. Chair.
yes,
Well, I wonder if someone can just explain to me in simple terms how the Maori high water flow allocation, 20%, will actually be allocated. It's the paper indicates that it's available for quite a wide range of uses. But does it include, for example, monetising it so that it could be, for example, sold to a irrigator, Maori or Pākehā?
The allocation for Māori development or wellbeing is a new approach in allocation in New Zealand, and we did get some legal advice as to whether or not it was possible within the terms of the RMA and what we might need to do to make it work and be effective. There are some definitional issues that still will face us, and we are looking for further direction through the consultation phase as how that might be crafted to be clear and to be transparent in terms of who is able to apply for the water and what uses that water gets put to. So at the moment it's reasonably flexible, and your scenario is possible within the context of what you were saying, but we need to be careful about what we are providing for in that policy. So there is a bit of work around being definitive and what activities we anticipate being eligible for their allocation.
Okay, so it's a work in progress.
But it is looking positive in terms of its legality and how we provide for it. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to this page 4, item 6 on Amendment 1, this is the Māori high flow water allocations paper. Can you translate for me the paragraph at the top of that page? Note that this paper assumes the wellbeing development will be better addressed by applications aimed at a more general improvement to wellbeing that by private individuals who can make their own investment decisions within the wider allocation framework. Can you give me a plain English translation of that?
Well, it's really addressing the fact that we aren't able to allocate to individuals. So in terms of who might apply for the water, it's quite broad. An individual might apply for water who is also Māori and who might have private landownings that would benefit with further irrigation. So that would be a scenario in which the private landowner has also got access to other opportunities for water, such as sharing with neighbours, transferring from another location, for example.
Okay, yeah. So I was reading through this particular paper, which is actually quite technically written and was really hard to follow. I suppose I'm a little bit confused in that we don't actually have. There's no prescribed model how this is intended to go through at the moment. So at the moment everything is up in the air. So there's nothing. How is that actually included into Plan Change 9? into the initial draft, or is it just another one of those work in progress things that we've got?
No, there are provisions in the plan, there are policies and rules that would enable this to work. There just needs to be a bit more work around the actual definitions around what are we providing the water for. So is it for individual private gain, or is it for a more general Māori wellbeing outcome? So we do need a little bit more work on understanding what that means.
Okay, so is that a decision that will be brought back to this committee at some stage?
We are looking for making this the topic of some consultation with the iwi authorities in particular to see how they would translate iwi wellbeing and development in those terms.
Okay, and then once we've got that feedback back from those organisations, then that would come back to this committee for a final
We can
decision.
refine the
Okay,
policy.
that's cool.
Yeah.
So Indian Council to confirm everything's coming back to this committee.
Yep. Okay. Further question on that particular paper, Chair?
Yeah.
Further down on that particular page, you're talking about the iwi hapu management plans and how that, when preparing and reviewing regional plans, that the council must have regard to the
MPs, yeah.
MPs. The same mandatory recognition for IH MPs does not exist in RMA for consent applications. So is that saying to me that the current iwi hapu management plans aren't taken into consideration for RMA decisions now?
No, what that says is that none of the iwi hapu management plans address this particular issue. So there's nothing to take into account or have regard to.
Okay, because I kind of thought that was part of the point of having an iwi hapu management plan.
If there was such a beast, it could help guide the development of the policy that would have then regard to the allocation of high flow water for Māori development, but we don't have that kind of guidance in an iwi management.
So the iwi hapu management plans are silent on that particular issue? Right, that's what I wanted to know.
Peter.
So my question relates also to this harvesting of water at high flows, and it relates to the water conservation order. And although I'm in support of this allocation in principle, I want to know how the implementation of a water conservation order might hinder our ability to make any such application, and wonder whether you have some comment on that.
I'm probably not the expert to have reviewed the provisions in the water conservation order as they currently stand, because we are dealing with the third version of the water conservation order. I do, and so I can call on Dr. Smith to give some views, but do you want to come up and talk to that? Because I suppose my high-level comment is that it's not entirely clear what the water conservation order does prescribe and how it will impact, but my understanding is that it will impact what we are proposing as the high flow regime. So Jeff, do you want to talk to that?
So the allocation in tank is for an 8 cubic metre a second allocation that flows above 20 cubic metres in the Ngāroa River. The proposed WCO is proposing that there are no takes above 60 cubics or 3 times the median, so that would be affected. And also they're very woolly on how they define the acceptable high flow allocation between 20 and 60 cubics. They just make statements about effects being no more than minor. So in a way, we could say that the effects are no more than minor in the tank allocation, and there may be an allocation acceptable within the WCO bounds between 20 and 60 cubics, but above that, the WCO prohibits it.
Yes, so one could argue that the implementation of the WCO as it is currently drafted actually militates against the what we're trying to do here, and arguably also against the potential for us to make augmentation environmental flows.
Yep, definitely.
Any more questions? Yes, sorry.
Mr Chair, I wonder whether I could have some clarity around the Section 32 evaluation. What's its current status? When does that get tabled, per se? And when and how is it used throughout the process?
So the Section 32 is currently still in draft. There are sections that still need to be developed. It is an iterative process. We will still be requiring receipt of the advice from the iwi authorities to be summarised within that. So we do have to wait for that consultation process to be carried out before that particular portion of the Section 32 can be updated. Well, in terms of its final iteration, that will be delivered in time for the notification of the plan. That's when it's expected to be finalised, because it will also be... Lost Tanya. It will also...
Can you sing?
Got a very slow.
It will also need to summarise the decisions that this committee are making on
Today?
The papers today.
Sure. So just following, if you bear with me, Mr Chair, I appreciate it's an iterative process. The advice coming from Tangata Whenua via the documentation tabled today, does that form part of the iwi consultation? What's the status of that other than being an RPC contribution to the draft plan? Where does it fit in terms of Section 32?
The words that you got today will be inserted as part of the plan change, so they become PC9, and they go towards acknowledging, in terms of Section 32, the connection between the management of values and providing for the values. So it just provides more acknowledgement and support for the rest of the plan in relation to how we've dealt with values, both Māori values and the community values.
I appreciate that. My question really is more specific to the Section 32 process and the status of that documentation in terms of consultation with iwi. Is it a substitute for that consultation? Does it form part of it? So essentially we get down to the definition of iwi and how the respective parties then contribute on that, given that status.
I'm actually not sure exactly what you're asking.
So when we go through the pre-consultation process, an important part of it is to go to iwi and obtain their feedback. And I'm assuming we've got that list of recognised iwi entities that are there. They are provided with the documentation that's tabled today, which includes this. Are RPC members and the iwi entities they represent consulted at that level as well? So how does the dynamic work?
So I wonder if it would be more helpful to view it as an outcome of the insertion of these pages and this reference into the plan change is in fact an outcome of a consultation process that actually has included the entire tank process, because intrinsic throughout the entire tank document is the input of all members of that group, including the treaty partners group. The Regional Planning Committee legislation, or terms of reference, or both, I can't remember, are quite clear that, to me, quite clear that consultation around this table is a part of the consultation, but is not in substitution and cannot be in substitution of the formal consultation process that we are going to undertake at the outcome of this with iwi authorities. So again, perhaps I've misunderstood your question, but my view is that the insertion of this part into the document, which then will effectively then form a part of the subsequent Section 230 overall Section 32 analysis, is actually just an outcome of that ongoing continuum.
Sorry, just to humour me a little longer. So members of the RPC are able to put their other hat on when that consultation document comes back and be a party to their respective iwi entities to be consulted and to comment on that documentation. Is that how that works?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll be able to. Tom?
Yeah, I have a question about the other presentation of this to other parties while the official pre-consultation is occurring. It seems to me that the people who are officially designated, like ministries and local governments and so forth, will pore over this in granular detail to give us the advice they're going to give us. But meanwhile, we will go out of here today, assuming we approve this, saying, hey, we got a great plan that we're ready to talk to you about. For all the rest of the public, we'll need to know sort of what's on the table, what is being talked about in this official process, and when will that material be prepared, or what's the plan as far as rendering this in some form that mere mortals, such as folks that might be asked for a view on the port, let's say, would have enough information to have a sense of this, we're on the right trajectory here. They agree with Councillor Barker that we ought to be applauding, and so forth. So how does all this get translated into something understandable? And when will that happen?
Hopefully it'll happen concurrently. So we have specific notification requirements, pre-notification consultation requirements with iwi and territorials. But while that's happening, the tank documentation will also be publicly available, and we can also alert the key stakeholders and tank members that it is available for further feedback at the same time. And we anticipate collating all of the feedback and providing an evaluation at the same time as we evaluate the iwi feedback for the committee to have a look at early next year.
I guess I would contend that I've not seen anything that a normal person, ratepayer, let's say, could understand as to, so where have we landed? Do we provide for water storage or not? Are we doing this or are we doing not? What is this allocate, this, what, you're assuming that very informed people are going to be talking with us over the next 2 months, basically. And meanwhile, everybody else is going to get a press release that says, we've solved the problem, here's our plan change, or I don't know. I mean, what is the rest of the world?
Councillor, can I just make the observation that there's a heavy lifting piece to do in terms of wider community engagement around what's proposed, and I think the time to do that will be at the point of notification. The pre-consultation is targeted, and it's deliberately targeted in legislation, and I think we run the risk of expending our resources perhaps prematurely, and also trying to engage the wider public, notwithstanding the fact that it is proposed to put the version 8 on the website, but trying to have that engagement at the same time as we're having the targeted engagement with a bunch of stakeholders who by statute have been identified as having a precursory need to be involved.
I'm not arguing to broaden the engagement. I'm also saying that what's on the website is equally obtuse to the normal person, and that it's crazy to assume that over the next 8 weeks or so, your basic average environmentalist or your basic average orchardist or whatever isn't going to want to know where is this landed, where in some broad terms.
So Tom,
where is this landed?
Look, I agree with you. I'm just not sure about the timing, because I think the issue is that we are going into an intensive engagement process with some key stakeholders around refining this, and going out at this point with a bunch of, let's say, full-page ads in the newspaper that explain in really simple terms what's in here. So our messaging at this stage, in terms of any press release coming out of next week's council meeting, should this be agreed to today, needs to emphasise the fact this is only a step in the journey, and that we are undertaking this targeted pre-consultation. I think that wider engagement that demystifies what is, because demystifying this so it is readily understandable by the general public is a significant science and policy communication challenge, and I think we've got to go away and do some work, and we have to do some clear planning about how we're going to do that. But my preference would be to do that in relation to the notified plan once we've been through this targeted pre-consultation period. So if you could just bear with us would be my plea on that.
Toro first, get back to you, Paul.
So could I, through you, Chair, could I just add to that under the terms of reference with the Tank Collaborative Group, there is an undertaking or obligation upon staff to take the version 8 back to that group and discuss it in detail with them. So to date, they have been the ones who have had the greatest insight, and they have been the ones who have been reporting back to their respective constituencies. I know it's still a narrow group, but there is that obligation on us. So there will be another Tank meeting in early January.
Perfect.
So if we think that this is a better solution than the WCO, do we? Do we?
Yes.
Well, how are we going to explain that to the average person, a Fish and Game member or Forest and Bird member is going to say there's a bunch of horse crap. I want the water conservation order. And they're going to be out there hearing today, presumably, that we think we have something that we should be moving forward to serious consultation that you're not part of and won't be asked about. But bear with us, trust us. We have a better answer here. You just can't see it yet because you're not elevated enough in the hierarchy to see it. But trust us, we got a better answer than that crazy WCO bunch.
Well,
I don't get it.
the WCO process has got a long way to run yet. The hearing, the hearings, the stage 2 hearings.
Being tested against.
The stage 2 hearings recommence in February. They will go for a period, and there may be hearings further into next year. So look, I think this is a long run, but I think the point you raise is valid. Is that there are key stakeholders that will be wondering what they're getting out of this process. And I guess I'm just reflecting on the fact we don't want to get ahead of ourselves in terms of assuming too much about what's in and what's out until we have satisfied various different statutory steps along the way. But certainly it is the intention for us to provide version 8, subject to its adoption for pre-consultation today and next week, to the Special Tribunal, and to note that we are in this next phase, and certainly in our evidence to the Special Tribunal, we will be pointing to the significant benefits that this plan change bring to the overall planning landscape relative to the Water Conservation Order, and we'll be fighting that fight appropriately.
Toro.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. In terms of going forward with the consultation process, Mr. Chair, to have some kind of
push your mic over to that young man, please.
Can't hear you, Toro.
Oh, sorry. It would be good to have some kind of context in terms of why there's a need for some allocation to Māori, because that's a question people are going to ask. Many people in Hawke's Bay don't know that 5 people own 60% of the water, and Māori have been prejudicially affected by the past processes of the water allocation. And with new developments, I suppose, new opportunities, there are Māori who do want allocation, and there are communities that have been disadvantaged, like Bridgepower and all the rest of it, because of past water allocation. So it would be good to put something together. And there's also the other side of it. Māori believe they own 100% of the water. We've never given it away. So, why I would not like to see a number given in terms of percentage. I would just like to say that there's an acknowledgement that there's a need for Māori communities to avail our own opportunity to access the God-given right. So, yeah, kia ora.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to, a bit of a follow-on from what Councillor Belford was line of questioning. What's the intention after it's gone through this consultation? No, what do you-
Pre-notification.
Pre-notification consultation, right? And then it's going out for public notification.
Once the committee decides that it's ready to go to public notification.
Okay. How long does that public consultation normally go on for?
There's a minimum of 20 days.
Okay, because this is a challenge that we have in terms of, to me, around our consultation processes, especially with the public, is we've had and we've harped on about it again and again and again in the press about how the tank process has been going on for 6 years and yada yada yada, and then we're giving the public 4 weeks to get their head around, if they want to, a quite complex document and the consequences of that to give feedback into that process. And I just think that's something we need to take into consideration in terms of how, when we start writing up the information for the public consultation, whether 4 weeks is long enough even for people to get their heads around that.
So staff will make a recommendation on the decision of this committee.
Yep.
And council.
Any other questions?
Sorry, Mr Chair, just for clarity. So in response to Councillor Bailey's question, did the response was 4 weeks for the consultation?
That's a minimum statutory time frame, isn't it?
Oh, okay, because I thought I saw 6 weeks in the document.
Oh.
That's for the...
That was what has been proposed for this pre-notification consultation, not the notified consultation.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Which is after that.
Which is after. That 6 weeks was based on the RPC's previous discussions.
Okay, we don't seem to have any more pending questions. Do we have a mover for the recommendations on page 15, which is 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, the final 1.4 recommends, and also we are also receiving the information papers on item 10 and 11. Do we have a mover?
I think it would be appropriate for the co-chairs to move and second the resolution.
I will move.
Sorry, Chair, can I just offer an amendment that you may want to consider as 1.4.1, when it agrees that consultation should commence. Could we change that to whatever the pre-notification, just to make it clear what consultation doesn't actually do?
Pre-notification consultation, yeah.
Pre-notification
Yeah,
consultation?
I'm happy with that. You happy with that, Tom?
Yep. And similarly with 1.4.2.
Yeah, okay, so with that alterations, I will move. Tora, will you second?
Arm up behind my back, yes.
Arm up behind your back. It's the knife I've got here. I always come from the front, mate.
It's an improvement from the knife, that's right.
Toro has seconded. I will speak first. It's been a journey to get here. Huge amount of work from a relatively small group of people, and as I've said before, I went along to quite a few of the tank meetings. I didn't have an obligation, I wasn't part of it, and just to see the people over the last, I think, 2 years start to understand each other's positions, because they came from a wide spectrum of interests, including people who just wanted to irrigate and people who didn't want anyone to irrigate, people who didn't care so much about the rivers and didn't see it through the lens, the Tangata Whenua lens, and we had to all learn how to do that. It was a really revealing moment when Tangata Whenua said that water was a tonga, and Pākehās in the room were all quite stunned. Well, we didn't realise that, you know, and I was there that day, and Māori Apatu spoke with some conviction about it, and so in summary, it was a real learning curve for everybody who sat through those meetings. And we have arrived at this point of time. It's not the end of the journey, but it is certainly a long way along a very complex and a journey which everyone had to learn a lot about each other's values. That it wasn't just about the economy, it was also about the environment. So I want to just congratulate team, our team, who stuck to it, and went to all those meetings, and who had to understand the complexities of all this, which I'm sure a lot of people probably still don't, and because it's a very complex subject. So big thanks to Tom, Marianne, and your team. You did a fantastic job. And I want to give also a really heartfelt thanks to everyone who sat around 6 years. And some of you around this table, I know Tom was there the whole time. I think Peter also was there the whole time. So you guys did it was beyond the pale. You didn't get paid to do that. You did it. And it's all greatly appreciated by our community. Peter Paku, he was there. Usually when I was there, he was there, that's for certain. Representative Hito Takatini. And who else around this room was there on all of those?
Harpy went a few times.
Harpy used to come. He was a visitor like me, though. But there were some people that went from the very beginning, every single meeting, all the way through, and it was a huge commitment, so I want to thank everyone for that. And it hasn't been easy to get around this table because we had to re-understand it and re-understand each other, really. So it's a tribute that we have arrived at this point. Toru, do you wish to speak? With your arm up your back.
I'll just reiterate the points made by Rick. It's been a long journey, taken a lot of commitment by not just the staff and the councillors and Tangata Whenua. And, you know, there was a time when we were shooting at each other, and we don't want to get to that point again when we get water wars, so we need to resolve these issues over the table.
Other speakers? Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would get a kicking from my constituents since that they're all affected by this plan change if I didn't speak at least on their behalf. So it has been a very long journey. There's a lot of people sat around that stakeholder table for a long time, made significant commitments of energy and effort on behalf of the people they represented in the wider community. And I take my hat off to the work that they've done. And I also would be remiss in not paying tribute to our many staff members who have committed above and beyond to help us deliver this plan change. So well done to all of those people. And it's certainly been an interesting dynamic to have observed those meetings and watched the relationship between the people who sat around the stakeholder table. They came from many different perspectives. They probably had quite firm views when they went into that room, and they had to think about other people's perspectives, and they had to change their own perspectives as a result of the conversations and the information that was put in front of them. It was a really difficult process because the science was not always available in a timely way. The science would turn up in bits and pieces, and it would prompt discussion, and then there would be a silence, and then we'd get more science and we'd be able to advance the discussion. So it's been a difficult and fraught process at times, as we all know. But we've got to an outcome, and we've got to an outcome because the community understands the need and the preciousness of water, and we're all to be congratulated on getting there.
Any other speakers? Otherwise I will...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, oh, sorry. See, your blind spot.
Blind spot. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too, in consideration of the people in our rohi and our Hariri, we're part of the tank process, and I congratulate the representatives from Ahuriri who have turned their mind to it. They're seeing the tank process as an opportunity to achieve the outcome, and Piri Prentice, for example, is very fond of saying it's about being able to swim in the estuary, to eat the kai moana from the estuary, and to enjoy it. They're the outcomes, and if it takes a tank process to help do that, well, that's one other arrow in the armoury to achieve that. I think also is the appreciation and decision making around this table is that not only have mana whenua the responsibility on behalf of the people they represent to put a viewpoint, but they have the added burden of making a decision on the whole community. And some of the earlier commentary today was about decision making for the whole community. This is it. We are constituted, the RPC is constituted to promote the Resource Management Act obligations, which are for all in the community, and that's an added burden. But I do make the observation that, and we all put different hats on from time to time, there is the opportunity, particularly through the Section 32 consultation process, for Tangata Whenua to also go back and contribute via their other opportunities, and that's through their own iwi or their own rohi. That's the opportunity also to uphold the Māori values which are held so dear. But at the end of the day, this is a process where we are making decisions for the wider community, and I think that's an added burden for Tangata Whenua around this table.
Thank you, Neil. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's... I'm a great fan in community-led decision-making processes, and I think this is what this has ended up being. I must say I was pleasantly surprised once the Tank Group had kind of finished their deliberations and they presented us with the initial draft that there were only 6 items in contention. I thought that's a great indictment of the people who sat around the table and the staff that did all the work on their behalf. Because as Peter has said, or a number of speakers have said, when that process first started, there were, I can imagine the differences of opinions in the room. So it's great to see that the community's come together on this, because at the end of the day, this is going to lead to significant changes in how things are done on the Heritonga Plains, and it needs to have community buy-in to be able to do that. And unless it's something that's put together by the community, that would have been really, really challenging. This is going to make our task looking forward that much easier. Thank you.
Any other comment? Otherwise, I'll put the motion. Oh, Api, you need to tap the guy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to, at risk of repeating what's already been said today, I want to acknowledge the comments of Tom and the efforts of the staff over the last 7 years, and particularly those comments from our councillors who took the time to recognise their concerted and sustained effort to result in this plan. My only corridor would be by way of indications to our iwi groups, as Councillor Curtin indicated. My observation during the tank process was that it can be difficult, not just in the tank process, but it can be difficult when presenting different perceptions of the same matter. You would have seen that when Napier City sat here and talked around sediment movement and nutrient levels in the estuary, how the interpretation of one set of data can come out with different outcomes. So I just want to acknowledge and state my appreciation for the concerted effort of staff and of our Māori and Tangata Whenua representatives in that space to try as best they could to find ways in which to find common ground and interests through the use of the different terms that we have to describe the same thing. Whether that be water quality and turbidity versus mana o te wai, whatever the terms we use, it did require us to be able to stretch ourselves in our understanding of our terminology in order to accept the perceptions and perspectives of those around the table with you. So I just want to acknowledge what effort that takes, and that when the Tank Group came and presented the plan change to this committee, they did so openly and honestly, saying we did the very best we could, but we recognised that there were limitations in that process, and we now throw it to the gods to see what happens. So out to the gods the notice goes, and to our iwi groups who are watching this through live stream or will be informed through various correspondence coming from this committee, we would encourage you to pick up this plan change, to look closely particularly at the values and various aspects where this plan will have impact upon your area, and to add your contribution, your wisdom and your experience to help us to further define those areas of this plan which we found challenging over the last 7 years. So as Councillor Curtin said, the opportunity to add that detail, to add that refinement is coming, and so while acknowledging our staff and our councillors, I also send a challenge out to our area groups. Pull your socks up, chaps, we're on our way. Kia ora.
I think on that, thank you, Jenny.
Hi.
Yes, sure.
Kia ora koutou. I'd be remiss of me not to call it on behalf of the Tangata Tamatea Settlement Trust. And throughout this whole process, we've actually transformed through the whole process from He Tōtaki Tini to Tangata Tamatea Settlement Trust. And so we've engaged in this tank process in various forms as iwi settlement groups evolve and morph into their own being. So I just want to acknowledge and thank all the people that have been involved in various spaces and places. And their role might have been just to carry the flag to this point and then pass the flag on, but to get it to this point. And that includes all the staff, because I've been involved in tank through various organisations, and you meet a lot of the staff. So it's been a hell of a journey. So I'd just like to acknowledge all those, and all those that have passed, that aren't here to see this. And whilst I think it's always great for local people to create their own solutions, and I will always promote that. Ahi ka, for us in settlement, it's a huge challenge for us now for ahi ka to apply and settle their own solutions. So that's the next space that we're in. So again, just thank you to everybody. And I too long for the process of layman's terms on this rather complex and layered tank plan. Yeah, so congratulations and thank you.
I'm going to move the recommendations and the receiving of those other documents. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? It's carried unanimously, which is quite an achievement. Thank you very much.
Knock off now?
I feel like a pen in one.
Go and have a party.
Yeah, well done.
Is there any more doing?
Unanimously accept the slaps and punches.
That's a day's work, Chinny.
It's a day's work. Okay, but unfortunately, Councillor Barker, we're not finished for the day. We've got to move to item 7, Tangata Whenua Remuneration Review, and who...
Chair, I'll speak to this one. And can I just start off by acknowledging that this paper is not entirely complete with respect to some of the key context to this, and there's just 2 things I'd like to draw your attention to in that respect. The first of which is that the terms of reference for this committee does set out a procedure for setting remuneration, and that should have been acknowledged in the paper. That methodology involves the appointment by the 2 co-chairs of 2 independent persons to undertake a review in line with the triennial period to set for the term the level of remuneration. Now, in the event when we last had this reviewed, we just settled on a single reviewer. And I think as we think about doing this again, either now or at some later point, it's worth considering whether actually having one reviewer that's agreed by both council and Tangata Whenua reps is actually a more efficient way of doing it, as long as we're happy with the reviewer and they are appropriately qualified. So we do have an existing process, and that existing process has not been adhered to strictly to the letter of the existing terms of reference. So I just wanted to make that point. The other point I just wanted to register is that when the previous reviewer undertook this exercise, there was dissatisfaction with the quality of that review at that time, and there was an undertaking by staff, which I would like to acknowledge was not brought either back to this committee or to the council, that there would be an opportunity for another review in relatively quick order. I think 6 months was the indication that was given. So there was an expectation on the Tangata Whenua side that the council had agreed to review this again in short order, but I'd just like to acknowledge that that's not something which was brought to council for agreement on that. So we're now in a situation where there has been an expectation that this would be reviewed again in relatively short order. And so this paper has been prepared consistent with that. Again, this would be a departure from the methodology. What is proposed here is that if the committee does believe that this is something which we should just look at once more within this triennium to assure the committee that the level of remuneration is appropriate, that we would commission an independent party, appropriately qualified, who is agreed perhaps by the co-chairs and deputy co-chairs, and I would commission that firm to undertake that further review. There are some guiding principles within the existing terms of reference about how the remuneration should be set, and that does speak to some extent to equity between councillors and Tangata Whenua reps. So we would look to draw upon those principles in the existing terms of reference for conducting that additional review.
Chair?
Yes.
I think the history that's just been recounted is instructive, and we've had some issues on this in the past. And I would think that this paper should not proceed until we have a recommendation that comes back to this committee setting out who the independent reviewer is, and this council sign off on it. So this committee sign off on it, and then this committee is bound by the outcome. I think it would be, so I think we should have it transparent, see who it is,
sure,
what the terms of reference are. Everybody then sees it on the table, offer their own comments, and then it is a committee decision, and only proceed on the basis of that. As this is written, even with your amendment, too much responsibility sits on your shoulders, in my view, about that. Too many decisions for you to make. They should be clear to everyone here, and everyone should commit to them.
So, Chair, I have no difficulty with that. We certainly would be seeking today, I guess, an indication of whether there was a desire to commence this process and then bring a paper back as per the suggestions of Councillor Barker.
When you say in terms of...
Into this as well.
Yes, Tony, you have to bang the glass too. Sorry.
Put it
No.
in mine.
Oh, okay. Thank you, everyone.
Turn it up, Tom.
I think the reality is that the terms of reference haven't been followed, although there was an offer to resolve the issues we had with the last expert doing the review by Rex and James, which was taken up subject to a review in 6 months' time done in accordance with the terms of reference. I don't have a problem with I think the terms of reference should be followed. And the reason for that is because it sets out a process that was negotiated, including with the appointers and council, and agreed upon, but it's even not actually been followed yet, because the last time the remuneration was reviewed was the first time. So I agree with James's point that if the co-chairs decide that they can settle upon one expert to do that review, that might be more efficient. I think that might be a good way forward. However, I think it's for the co-chairs under the terms of reference to determine who the appropriate expert or experts are. And it's not really for the RPC to be making those decisions. I think the RPC could be kept informed about that, but remuneration is not determined by the RPC. It's determined by that process in accordance with the terms of reference. So I just wanted to be clear about that. So yeah, that's my korero on that kaupapa. I think we should follow the terms of reference. If the co-chairs decide that they want to go with one expert, so be it, and then a report can be provided back to the RPC as to who was settled on in the end, and perhaps the conclusions of the report. But it's not a matter for the approval of the RPC as to what the remuneration is, nor who should be appointed to do it.
Rick and then Peter.
Well, that's all very well and good, but the fact is that when the report came back the last time, it was challenged by members of the RPC. And the thing is that we're all going to around this table have an opinion about it. And I think if we're going to go on the journey, it should be everybody. Now, I just make it clear, if it's not done by this committee, I will object to it. Just on process, I don't agree with that. If this committee is going to express an opinion on it, as it has done before, then it should express an opinion on who's going to do it and the terms of reference. We should all go on the journey the whole way.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, we haven't followed our own process. There's been a whole raft of concerns raised because of that. I think we have to follow the proper process. And unlike you, Tanya, I'm agreed with Rick. I mean, what it says in our paper here is a procedure for determining the remuneration to be paid. So that leaves it open to us to determine the process that is to be followed. And I think in the interest of transparency, I think this entire committee should sign off on what that process ends up looking like. So I think it's entirely appropriate that it comes back here for...
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify that while that's a reference to what's in the Act, what's omitted from the paper is that the existing terms of reference does have a procedure in it, and we are still working off the 2014 terms of reference, which were adopted by Council. So we actually have an existing process, which is the one that Tanya is referring to.
The two chairs?
Yes, correct. Now, if we want to depart from that, that is an amendment to the terms of reference, and as we all know, that requires unanimity, and we've been in a circular process around amendments of the terms of reference for the best part of 2 years. So we're sort of stuck with this past process. We haven't particularly followed it. We can either adhere to it or we can continue to have some degree of ad hocery, just noting that that may continue to cause grievance that we haven't followed existing terms of reference.
I just think in the light of where we've got to, and in the interest of transparency, I think it makes more sense to me that the co-chairs would come back to us as a committee with a recommendation, which we can then discuss and agree to adopt. That makes a lot more sense to me.
Alan?
Yeah, well, Mr. Chairman, I agree with my councillor colleagues, and I think it's important that the outcome of this, that we have confidence in it, and it doesn't become a source of tension or contention. I think a process whereby brought back to this committee for its endorsement after the chair and co-chair have worked on something with advice from the chief executive, of course, and his staff, then we will get a good and sustainable and uncontested outcome. That's important for the stability of the committee.
Tora, just before you talk, I'll go straight to you. All due respects to everybody around the table here, we did go through a process. We had a recommendation from Tangata Whenua of a company to do this, or a person. We accepted that recommendation, and it came back, and well, disappointment is, in the professionalism is an understatement, and Tangata Whenua weren't happy. No one was happy. I don't know how you can avoid a situation like that. I mean, we've now settled on a figure. What if a recommendation comes back and it's less? I don't think that'll arise in a lot of happiness around the table.
And that could be a possibility.
It's definitely a possibility. So you can go through the best, well thought out process in the world, but it can fail still. Tora.
Yeah. Well, just two issues that I noted from the last process. One was that the person who was chosen wasn't briefed very well, and he asked me a question twice about, he didn't even seem to know that there was co-chairs, you know.
That's right.
And I don't know whether he was suffering from dementia or what, but, you know, there were some issues associated with that person. So I think we do have to be careful in terms of the fact that, one, the person is briefed properly, and also that he's got some wits about him.
I can assure you he was well briefed.
You may or may not recall, I'm not sure if the information was passed on to the councillors or the RPC itself, but we had a big issue because the terms of reference set out the process, but the terms of reference supplied to the advisor or expert were an old set, which did not have the process in it. So from the get-go, you had someone devising a framework to work out how this remuneration should be arrived at, and didn't look at the framework or the process that was in the terms of reference, which clearly sets out what they should be looking at. So it was an unfortunate event all around. Had the terms of reference gone to this person still may not have come out with a good report, because it ended up being very disappointing, and numerous people who were interviewed commented that he didn't seem to be with it, which was really a shame. But I think there were a few flaws prior to that. So, look, as I said before, I don't mind the sharing of information with the RPC, but I think we need to understand that the terms of reference set out a process, and unfortunately it is not in this paper. So unless you've got the terms of reference in front of you, people may not be well informed about what it actually says.
Yep, and I accept that, Tanya. The paper's inadequately drafted, which is what I wanted to clarify at the front end.
Right. Can I just say, well, all of that's well and good, but in my opinion, this poorly chosen, poorly qualified, poorly informed, incompetent individual, had they come up with an answer that people liked, there would have been no issue. The fact is, he came up with an answer which people didn't like. Because the issue was contested, and after that, people then decided to say that he was this or that and the other. I don't want to go through that again. It was debilitating. The fact is, whenever the person comes up with the answer, it will be contested if it's not what people feel is the right answer. And they'll then search for the reasons for it. And that's why, if we're going to go back down this track, I want a completely open and transparent process whereby the person or the people who have been chosen to do this is on the table in front of us all here. We have clear line of sight of it, and when we say they're acceptable to us, we agree. And in doing that, we then have an obligation to accept the outcome at the end of it. If we don't do that, we then open ourselves up to being the same thing again. Oh, didn't know what they're doing. Who thought of that? There'll be finger pointing, whatever. I don't want to go through that again. I've had it.
Well, can I just pick up on that, Rick? I hear what you're saying. However, if you'll recall from reading the report, he aligns the remuneration of the Tangata Whenua members with a senior policy analyst, not being governors or co-governors. That's directly in contravention of the framework set out in the terms of reference. So on its face, the report was flawed. That was a main contention by the Tangata Whenua, and I'd hope you'd all agree that if your remuneration was being reviewed as councillors, but you were compared to staff or an analyst, that you might find some fault with that yourselves.
I would love that, actually. Staff get a lot more than we get.
Well, then the remuneration was adequate either.
Sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Just a question of clarification. Just a question of clarification then, Tanya. It sounds to me that the process, you want to go back to a process that's down in the written terms of reference at the moment, which kind of led to the outcome that we had last time, which was, I don't think was a process issue. I think it was more around the selection of the particular person who did that role. Whereas
no, it was a process issue. That person didn't follow the process in the terms of reference. They compared us with a senior analyst as opposed to what the terms of reference actually say, is it needs to be comparable with governors having similar roles.
But that was the reviewer that did that. It wasn't the.
He was provided with. Look, we've had this long-running problem of the 2000.
I'm still only halfway through what I'm trying to get at, James. Right? Okay, sorry. So, because my question is, what Rick wants to do, by it seems to me, is actually bring that decision as to who we select and the terms of reference that we give to that person to do the job is actually agreed to by this whole committee, rather than just by the two chairs, which is where you sit at. And I just wanted to know from you why you think that just having the chairs make that decision on their own instead of the whole committee is a better way to go.
Well, because I don't know how the councillors did it, but our co-chair came back to us and we discussed the nominee and we agreed amongst ourselves, and then that was put up. Then the councillors decided, or the co-chair on behalf of the councillors decided that he was comfortable with the nominee. So we discussed it amongst ourselves. Are you proposing that one or two people get put to the RPC as a whole and we vote as a whole?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, that's not consistent with the terms of reference. The Tangata Whenua have the ability to agree with their co-chair, who they would like, likewise with councillors, or we may agree on the same person and just have one. I would prefer to reserve that decision until we know who we're talking about. But as I've said, I've heard today that people want transparent and open and proper process. Well, we should start the process correctly by following what we all agreed to in the terms of reference.
But we did, but we did that, Tanya, and it failed.
No, it did. We did not. Look, the problem here is you guys don't have the information in front of you. Have a look at the terms of reference and see what it says. We don't have that information in front of us.
And that seems to be, because I was kind of a late entry into this discussion, and the first terms of reference I saw at this table was the wrong terms of reference.
Yes, correct.
And it's still not in any paperwork, so we don't know what the questions are because we haven't seen the terms of reference.
Correct.
So that's the point I acknowledged up front, Chair. Can I suggest that we can adhere to the terms of reference in spirit by yourself and the co-chair working with me on identifying whether or not there is a single provider to be proposed or two providers as per the terms of reference, working through the criteria that's in there, and we bring it back to this committee for concurrence once we've done that. It's adding an additional step to the existing terms of reference, but it's consistent with the approach, and it does enable this whole committee to own that appointment process.
Could we have the actual terms of reference?
We can email.
Yes, I don't even have that.
Yes. Well, look,
as well.
Just to be fair, I had to shred a copy in my office yesterday, which was the wrong one, to get the right one. Hence has been the shambles of this terms of reference.
Order, everyone. Api.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm recognising the tension and frustration in the room with this long-going saga. So with regards to the comments from Councillor Barker and the Chief Executive, I'm in support of us having a positive conversation around the potential of being flexible in the interpretation of the terms of reference, because it's the ultimate outcome that we're after. But I would like to take the opportunity to express to the Chief Executive, by way of clarity, some of my concerns around the last process. So even by the admission of the assessor, who misunderstood the initial assignment according to the papers that were provided to the RPC in May of this year, he also stated in his documents that he declined at first because he felt it was outside his expertise. But given the reasons provided by council, he agreed and consented to doing an assessment from a job sizing and market analysis type role. So the issues that I had, particularly with the result of that report, was that I didn't think, while the assessor went to some lengths to explain, first of all, that there is insufficient information in the public arena in which to be able to accurately assess remuneration for roles of this nature, and that it was slightly outside of his field of expertise. He did, however, outline the methodology that he would be following, which would be to take an equivalent full-time staff position that dealt with similar roles and aspects, and in his opinion, that was a senior policy analyst. So, overlaying the roles of the RPC Tangata Whenua reps with that of a closely matched senior analyst, he acknowledged the limitations in that, but he said based on that, the result he came out with was a salary range which he felt met most of the requirements of the brief that he was given. When that report landed on the table, there was some conversation at the Tangata Whenua group around elements that were missing from that assessment, and that's really what I would like to highlight at this stage. There are a couple of flaws, and I would love the opportunity to work with the staff around identifying these in more detail rather than taking up the entire committee's time. But in essence, there were some assumptions in his assessment which I think could have done with some challenge. The first was that a full-time senior analyst, policy analyst, would have at their disposal a level of resourcing and capability provided for them outside of their remuneration. That wasn't accounted for in the assessment. Yet there are roles within our responsibilities at our table that would require us, for example, the providing of information back to our constituencies, engaging with those constituencies, and the ability and resourcing to achieve that. Those are not necessarily addressed in that assessment, and that's one aspect of that assessment that I think falls short on providing a fair and equitable assessment on whether on what a remuneration might be. The papers before us today, within paragraph 3, it says, despite this increase, which would to me assume that we were after an increase, which was not the conversation at the Tangata Whenua table, but rather a fair and equitable assessment of the work conducted and fair and appropriate remuneration for the work undertaken. The assessment didn't account for all of the work that we as RPC members do in our role. It did, however, account for the reading of our agendas and the attendance of this meeting and our Tangata Whenua meeting. I think that if we were going to enter into this approach again, and it's my recommendation that we do give it some serious consideration, that the Chief Executive and the committee would be open-minded to addressing the terms of reference to this particular assessment, so that we can have equally the confidence that apples will be measured against apples. What I found as a result of reading all of the reports provided to us in May was that we were not comparing apples with apples, and that's why the report ended up being contentious. So I welcome the opportunity to bring this assessment back to the table. I also seek the support of the council and the staff to better define the criteria by which we would implement this assessment so that the outcome will be less contentious and more readily acceptable. Kia ora mō tēnā.
Let's get on. Let's get on, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for assisting me on. I think so too. I think that, are we happy with the recommendation that we're back to it, aren't we? But we do it this process and then we bring it back to the council, the full RPC.
I'm not happy with the recommendation on the paper.
As long as it comes back to you at the end.
Well, I think we're looking at a new recommendation, Chair, which recommends the council instruct the Chief Executive to work with the co-chairs on commissioning an independent review consistent with the methodology as set out in the terms of reference, and to report back to the committee on the proposed approach.
All committee.
Correct.
So does that mean, when that report comes back, that we've agreed to mandatory arbitration? Whatever comes back?
No. Look. I think one of the things which is curious about the terms of reference is it supposes that this independent person will decide what the remuneration is, and that's the end of the story. I don't believe that under the Local Government Act, councillors can dispense their own responsibilities to make the decision ultimately at the council table to provide the funding for that remuneration. We don't have an equivalent to the Remuneration Authority in operation here. You can't suspend your responsibilities under the Local Government Act to weigh up up all the considerations you need to do. So the final decision on what will be paid will ultimately have to rest with the council. I think that's a legal
I
fact.
understand, but so that's the legality of it. Can we make a side deal, looking at each other, that that's what we will agree to? Nevertheless, that the recommendation, we take it or leave it.
In much the same way that we have, say, for example, the findings of the tank group.
Well, I'd like to reserve my opinion on that, James. I think we should go with the recommendation that you've made, that you work with the co-chairs consistent with the methodology in terms of reference to, I guess, scope up the description of the tasks and the two or one experts that are going to be selected, and bring it back to the committee for discussion. And let's see where we land on that before we talk about whether or not they have the ability to make the determination of what the appropriate remuneration would be, because we haven't discussed that situation and we haven't received information about that. I would prefer to reserve our opinion on how that lies with the council's obligations elsewhere and under the terms of reference. We just haven't analysed it from that perspective. But we should move forward with your recommendation and then see where that gets us to.
Everyone happy with that?
Well, let's be clear about this, just to make clear. I am in 100% agreement with James on this. The decision on expenditure rests with the council.
It's ratepayer money.
No delegated authority or ability to do that.
Correct.
That's that. So if Tanya is saying that that issue is still up in the air and up for negotiation, well, let's have the discussion now, because I don't think it is.
No, Rick, what I'm saying is, this is the first time I've heard of this issue. I don't have any information, either from staff or anyone, to support that view. I'm open to hearing about that view, don't have any information with which to consider it. So I don't think we need to make a decision on that today. We've got a terms of reference. It was agreed by everybody. Let's get on with the review, and let's hear back from James, maybe some more information about who makes the final determination on the issue of remuneration. There was a whole lot of people poring over these terms of reference, so I cannot recall now whether that issue ever came up in terms of remuneration. But
Look,
I'm open to receiving advice about that.
we'll clarify that in the report back, and if necessary, we'll seek a legal opinion, but look, it should be fine.
If we don't agree on a resolution, where does the matter stand?
Today?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's any mandate to proceed with a review at this point.
Leaving us where?
With some dissatisfaction around the current remuneration and the basis on which it was set.
So there is a current scheme, but disagreement or unhappiness with it, and that's where matters would sit.
Correct. And as noted in the paper, this matter has been a distraction to the effective workings of this committee, so it's something that from a staff level we would like to get resolved.
Well, could I just clarify that? Because that's new information. What I understood to be, forgive me if I'm wrong, but we got a person to do the review. It was recommended, as I understood, and accepted by Tangata Whenua reps. The person undertook the job. At the end of it, there was dissatisfaction about the process and the outcome. And then subsequent to that, there was a sort of a round robin led by the chair of the Regional Council to find an outcome on the remuneration which was agreed. And I thought that was agreed. So are we now saying that the round robin undertaken by the chair of the Regional Council to resolve this matter is now in dispute?
No, what happened was, and as I said before, an offer was made by Rex and James of a remuneration level, which was then discussed by the Tangata Whenua, and we agreed to it on the basis that a proper review following the terms of reference was done in 6 months' time, because we weren't satisfied with the review that was done, and we were just offered an amount, and with the view of moving us forward, because that review should have happened promptly after the last triennial elections, and it had already been going on for well over a year or more. So that was where we got to. So Tangata Whenua did not accept the the offer of remuneration unconditionally. It was on the condition that a review could be done in accordance with the terms of reference within 6 months, so that we could actually feel settled that it was fair and equitable, as Alfie said. Now, if you haven't been informed of that as councillors, that's unfortunate. But the Tangata Whenua were aware of this, and we had discussed this issue with staff from the very moment we saw the decision of council, because when we saw that about the remuneration, we could see that it didn't reflect what we had discussed with staff.
And look, I don't think the chair of the council was necessarily aware that there was a 6 month request, because, to be perfectly frank, and maybe I was asleep, I wasn't aware of that either until it was brought to my attention that it had been agreed by my staff. But I take responsibility for that.
Well, thank you for that, because I was unaware of it. Had I been aware of that, I might have made a different decision.
Yeah, I thought we were settled as well.
That's right. Yeah. So if it was going to be that's an interim arrangement for 6 months, I might have said to myself, well, let's not do that. Let's go and do the job properly from the beginning.
Agreed.
And I was under the clear impression that the matter was being finally settled to all satisfaction. To be now told it was subject to caveats is disappointing.
Not particularly to, thank you, Mr. Chair, not particularly to add any other value to the comments on the table, but rather for clarity from the Chair. The motion's up on the screen at the moment. With regards to my comments around working collaboratively with you to identify the criteria, could that be found within the statement to commission an independent review? Work collaboratively with the Chief Executive, to work with the RPC co-chairs, to commission an independent review. Is that, I'm looking for clarity, is that where we would find an opportunity to put together the necessary criteria that would outline that assessment?
Well, look, I think the thing we need to first check is whether the criteria that's set out in the terms of reference is adequate, because that is the starting position, and certainly I think we've heard today a desire to adhere to the existing terms of reference. So it would just be a case of whether or not the committee considers that there's more that needs to be added. But I think the more we depart from the existing terms of reference, the more we run the risk of repeating this whole failure of process, if you like.
We also, Chair, went out to the community in the long-term plan consultation process and consulted with the community on this considerable increase, well above what was recommended by the reviewer, and so it's important we're not deceiving the community on this as well.
Follow the reviews, unfortunately.
Well, certainly if there are any substantive changes, we'll probably need to take them through the next annual plan process. That's true.
Can you read out the proposed resolution, because I can't see it?
Singular.
The RPC recommends that the Council instructs the Chief Executive to work with the RPC co-chairs to commission an independent review of the remuneration of RPC Tangata Whenua members in accordance with the RPC terms of reference for presenting to the committee for agreement prior to the appointments being made.
Yeah, so my only comment about that is that we're not talking about the council, we're talking about the
committee.
RPC.
Yeah, it does say the committee, yeah.
Okay.
And that should be appointment singular. We're not making 2 appointments, we're making 1.
Well, we don't know that yet.
Can we leave that open, Peter, given that the terms of reference currently says two independent persons, and I don't know why that was agreed to at the time, because in practical terms it's very, very difficult.
We could just calculate the price of these expensive consultants and hand it to you as an addition to the RPC guys.
The only thing I would say that in the light of this conversation, I'm absolutely even more committed to it being open and transparent. Whatever happens comes back here, because as this conversation's gone on, I now realise there have been other conversations being had on the side for which I was unaware of. I don't want it to happen again. So everything's on the table, on the deck, open, clear, no ambiguity.
Mr. Chairman, we're running the risk of becoming pedantic, and there's some important business to be done. I'd say we put the motion.
Sure. Let's get on the subject, please.
Okay, Toro's moving the motion.
I'm happy to second.
Second it, just to speak to it. Peter, just to speak.
No, enough's been said.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Move on. Next item.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Who's against? You're against. Oh, I'll catch up to you why.
Still
Not mine,
carries.
but I compliment it.
Could we have the terms of reference emailed today, the right ones?
The right one.
Because I just don't know what anyone's talking
Two
about.
versions, a 13 and a 14.
Thanks.
I don't have a clue.
We move to item 8, performance review. James, you're going to take us through that. Oh, Tom.
No, Tom with this.
So this item came to the committee on the 31st of October. We lost a quorum, and I think in terms of the group was in general agreement. Chair, my suggestion is that we can go almost straight to the recommendations. The way the legislation operates is there's two aspects to review. There is the compulsory requirement to conduct a review. It is staff's belief that the review has been conducted, and therefore we would like to record formally that that has been done because it's a statutory requirement. What happens following the review in terms of recommendations following the review is a process that's in play. So I'm just happy to simply recommend that you go straight to the recommendations.
Are there any questions for Tom? Paula?
Given there were only two parties that responded, it does raise a further issue in terms of remuneration. And that in other councils, the iwi entities, they actually get money to respond to activities outside of the committee business. So I would say that I take Debbie's point that in the long-term plan there was consultation for further monies, but it went against Tangata Whenua, what you might say, desire that their entities get resourced, and the money was instead spent by the council for its own internal capability by the appointment of a PO. So it does raise questions in terms of process. This is not the only issue that Tangata Whenua groups have not responded on. There's a number of them. So I would say that process is not quite completed. We cannot just have two parties in the Tangata.
And the question was, you got a question, or
the question is there going to be some resource given so that Tangata Whenua entities can respond in a professional manner?
Okay, that's the question. Paul, you got a question for Tom?
Yeah, I have. We're agreeing that...
You want an answer? He wants an answer. Hey, wait. Are we going to give Tangata Whenua more money so that they can respond to these things?
Not necessarily.
Well, what I could say, Chair, is that I had a discussion with the Minister of Treaty Settlements Friday before last on this very matter, and expressed the concern not only of this council but of councils throughout New Zealand about the ongoing impost of treaty settlement obligations agreed to by the Crown upon local government without commensurate resourcing. And in addition to that, the lack of resourcing support to treaty settlement entities to enter into the sorts of arrangements that we're talking about today. So we've certainly put that funding call at the feet of central government, and there was some concession that there is an issue to address there, but obviously it's a very large one, as the Crown has written many cheques that it can't cash throughout New Zealand in this regard. We did take this discussion in part to the long-term plan, and we do have some additional funding to support, although the calls for that, of course, is spread across other entities that wish to have funding contributions to the likes of iwi hapu management plans, as well as all the other funding participation for things like cultural impact assessment, etc. So we have a looming set of challenges that's certainly acknowledged, and it is no doubt something the council will want to readdress in its upcoming budgetary processes. But at the moment, we don't have significant freeboard to fund this. Indeed, our budgets for the independent advisors are well expended at this point relative to how far through the year we are. So we're short of the resources we have today to do what we've committed to do today, let alone committing to new things. And I guess I'd note in passing that engagement on this review of the RPC with the appointers goes to the fairly core governance responsibilities of those entities and doesn't relate to RMA decision making. It relates to their formal governance arrangements with us. So it's something that we would have expected could be resourced within the standing resources of the PSGs.
Can I suggest that money from stolen Māori lands that the council benefits from be utilised to support tangata whenua engagement? You get the Harbour Boards Act and all that sort of thing. The council makes a heap of money out of stolen Māori land. Why can't we get some benefit from that in terms of part of your reconciliation commitment as ethical people?
Thank you, Tora. You commented on the comment, but I've got to go to question time, so it's got Paul Bailey, and then Uppy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little confused, Tom. Section 10.2a says must no later than 3 years after the day of the first meeting of the RPC undertake a review of the performance of the RPC, and you claim that that's completed, yet we haven't actually had the outcome from the review. How can we have undertaken a review if we actually have no outcome yet?
So the paper last month reported that the outcome of the review was that 2 PSGEs and council provided some feedback, and the paper provided a degree of a summary of what that feedback was in general. I think the issue here more is that there is entirely no prescription within the legislation as to the form of the review, how the review should take place,
who does it,
who does it, or any process, and so look, we operate entirely in a vacuum of how to conduct the process. But so the legislation says we must conduct a review. The review, I believe, from recollection of the earlier paper, commenced in March or April of this year. There were a number of follow-ups seeking more feedback, but beyond that, there's actually little we can do. There's no mechanism within the legislation that can prescribe us anything. But what this committee has agreed to, and what is currently taking place, probably more helpfully, is one-on-one discussions that are taking place with all the PSGEs around what is the discretionary aspect of the review, which is to make recommendations following the review. So that's a process that's underway. So it's really simply a matter of drawing a line under that. And now I accept that may be considered to be an unsatisfactory process, but we just have nothing to hang on.
Well, I'm sorry, but we've actually received, we've received no review. We received a whole bunch of comments that 2 people have made. I haven't seen anything come back to this committee which reflects the views which I expressed to Piri the other day. I haven't seen anything about what other councillors have the views that they've expressed in terms of the ways that we can improve what happens here at RPC. I just cannot accept that there has been a review completed yet.
So the review was to be undertaken by the appointers, and what we were also very conscious of is that it was not necessarily staff's role to wade in or make some qualitative or subjective comments around the formation of that review. So we've requested comments from the appointers. We have communicated with this committee what feedback we got, and we did that in the last paper, and I can provide another copy of that, of the previous paper, which maybe in retrospect I should have just provided the whole paper again, just trying to cut it down, and that perhaps a mistake. And that's the process.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the recommendation.
Wait a minute. Uppy wants to say something. Sorry. Hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, just by extension, I'm happy to second. Tom, thank you very much for the work they have done. I recognise, especially as a Māori working with Māori often, it can be challenging, even as one who sits at the table with a PSG, to get results in any type of review process, as we often struggle against the resourcing of those within our constituency to meet the demands of those of us at the table. So I first want to acknowledge that not just Māori, but particularly in this case, we have our challenges around engaging in these processes, and I just want to acknowledge your attempts and your ability to wear the frustrations of the results of that today. So what I was hoping to do was not to necessarily challenge the motion on the floor, but ask if you could recirculate those documents from last month's meeting in relation to this item, please. Just a digital version and email is fine.
Good, Scott. I'm happy to do so, and perhaps for Councillor Bailey's benefit is that the legislation does require there's a discretion for this, for the appointers to conduct another review at any stage.
I have some problems with this as well, I must admit. I'm not sure that that I have been interviewed in regard to the review, Tom. I mean, I'm not sure they have.
Well, we had a council workshop to form a position, and that was done.
So that's
because
that's the thing.
Because the appointer is the council, the appointer is not each individual councillor. So we had a workshop to do that, but parking that. We have asked Petty to get around everybody to inform us about how the committee can work better. And that's an ongoing process of adaptation, which we don't want to stop. But just for the purpose of the statutory exercise, I'll say that is now closed out because we've gone round in circles on this and wasted an awful lot of time and energy trying to make that existing process work. Draw a line under it and let's focus on moving forward.
I can understand that, James, but at that workshop, because I suggested that I had a number of things that I wanted to input into it, because for one reason or another I wasn't able to do that on the time, and it sounds to me that they haven't been included in the review, because I don't even know what's in the review, because I haven't seen one. There's nothing.
So the notes of the council workshop and the letters from the two PSGs, which is the whole content of the review, it's the views of effectively 3 appointers, was provided in the last paper, as Tom said.
Okay, Uppy, you've got final wind-up, have you? Uppy?
Yeah, sorry, so just by way of a recommendation to the Chief Executive, I note in the paper put before us today, number 11, paragraph 11, it talks about the Pou Whakarai meeting with PSG chairs and councillors. Given the complexity and the lack of input that's come from our groups, is there an opportunity, rather than reassigning fresh resources, to perhaps expand the ability of the Pou Whakarai to engage with those same groups while he's engaging with them face to face? Would there be any value in that?
Sorry, I don't understand the question.
Was it too late?
Perhaps I could respond to that. So the idea of the Te Pou Whakarai actually going around meeting everyone was to understand the component parts of council and across all of its committees. The RPC review came in midway through that, so I'm trying to accommodate that as part of the very informal discussions I'm having with people. To this time, I've only met with 2 councillors. The invitation has been out there, but I haven't had any response back, so that I can meet with each and every one of you. So that's in progress. The way it's going at the moment, it's probably unlikely to be complete until the new year in the first quarter. So I'm dependent on councillors and also Tangata Whenua, Tai Whenua, responding back in the positive for an opportunity to meet.
First of all, Jenny was then you, Rick.
The workshop that was conducted for the councillors, given it was an RPC review, and given we're a committee, I'm just wondering why we were not included.
Because each appointer had to provide a view into the process, and the council is one appointer, and then each PSG is an appointer. We did actually, at the outset of this process, attempt to have a whole committee discussion on this, and it was not particularly successful because of the many issues and tensions that were about at the time. So the process which was signed off by this committee was to invite each appointer to feed in formally. That's
Just a note, as not being the appointer, I actually did submit to the settlement group a paper on the review, but third readings and everything else occurred and it stopped there. So So I just thought if there's an opportunity for the group, but obviously not. So kia ora.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. It would be useful if I had all my information in front of me. So I just would like to withdraw my seconding of the motion. I've been provisioned with a copy of the documents from last month, and I realise that accordingly, and I'm quoting from the papers, accordingly through this review, councillors will recommend that the arrangements with the independent advisors are terminated in favour of increased internal resourcing. So that impacts heavily upon us to be able to do our role. Again, if the assessment around remuneration had identified the value of those independent advisors, we might have been able to kill two birds with one stone. But I'm withdrawing my seconding of that motion now that I'm aware of the outcomes of the review. Kia ora.
So that was the outcome of the council workshop. I guess it goes back.
Council workshop?
Yeah.
Well, that's the review.
So exactly.
Yeah, it does say workshop.
So look, I think this is a great example of how people with the best of intentions draft legislation and put provisions that are largely unworkable, wholly ambiguous, and put obligations on people that they can't fulfil.
Can I?
Just saying.
Can I first and then... Oh, Rick Rick before Tora even here.
Can I just say that we can flog ourselves to death over the review or not review. I agree with the point made by James that when this was envisaged, people weren't quite aware of how it would operate. You know? What this is going to be is a learning process. And if we're going to get stuck up on the form and the shape and the nature of the review, we're never going to go forward. It only matters if it matters. The fact is, this entity will work only because the people make it work, and it'll be by an iterative process over and over again. We'll figure it out by ourselves as we go. And going back and picking over who said what, how many people wrote and how many people didn't, is not helpful at all, in my view. I just think this is a conversation which is going to take us absolutely nowhere. I think the work that Billy's doing will help inform that. Our own collective thing will come up with ideas which we can improve it. We'll just get on and do it and improve it as we go. We're going to build the plane as we fly. That's as I see it.
So are you seconding Alan's motion?
Yeah, where we
Up he has already.
No, he's withdrawn.
No, sorry, withdrawn.
I'd just like to say that, you know, reviews are very healthy things, and you should not be threatened by criticisms or people who identify an issue that may need to be addressed. And we need to also take guidance from how other people operate. Like in the United Nations, they talk about for Indigenous people pre and informed consent. In the Parliament, they talk about good faith, and we need to be operating in good faith. And
Sure do.
so, not only should we be identifying where we can improve, we need to be offering solutions. And the reason why a lot of the treaty groups have not participated is we are very busy people. We don't have the resources to
pretty busy.
get involved. Look, I get about every day I'll get something from some government department who want feedback on this and that and whatever. I don't have the time, and they don't pay me. So why should I do it? And a lot of you don't do things unless you're getting paid as well. So just treat us equally.
Tora, I need to comment on that. These councillors don't get overpaid. Most of them work. Yeah, but most of them work incredibly hard, and some of them working 6 days a week. And I know, and they go all around. No, I know, but you're on your own business, and you know they're working on council
I don't
business.
Look at my business.
Well, I'm just saying, and you know, it's not helpful in the review that your letter said we should all be sacked. So, you know, that's just, you know...
As I said, it keeps you on your toes.
Well, you know, it's not that helpful or constructive that that's what you said in your review letter. So we could have a review, but you know, I sort of have some sympathy with what Jenny said that we should have a workshop together, because everybody knows I have some very frank positions around around this committee, and I'm prepared to argue it and debate it with everyone here. So we can go and spend another $50,000 on another reviewer or do what we want, but You know, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to sit down and it would be a Saturday or Sunday and write a letter about the reviewing. So, you know, we just can't continue to say that you work hard and other people don't, you know. And, well, it's kind of the inference. Okay, look, are we going to agree with this or not? Because...
I'll second it, Chair. Put it to the vote.
Okay. Alan moved it. Fenton seconded it. The recommendation says that a performance review has been completed. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Against.
It's four, no, 1, 2.
We have a missing on the
4.
screen there.
Yeah.
It's just
2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16.
There is.
I think it's lost.
It's lost.
Are we agreeing that it's
Needs 13 votes, so we could, no, we could drop 3. No, it's lost. It is lost.
Okay.
It's lost.
So the review continues.
No, yeah, the review continues. It's failed.
So
I moved.
should we send another
The
letter
review
out?
be discontinued. I'm over it.
Yeah.
Tom's seeking guidance. Should we issue another letter
No.
to the appointers and ask once again for input? Because
I'll oppose
at some point we've got it. We do need to conclude this. So we'd be grateful for guidance from the committee as to how to conclude this.
From my point of view, James, what I haven't seen is a paper from staff that collates all the input we've had and says this is the outcome after the review, and this is the recommendations that come out of all the input to say how we can improve as operating as a committee, because that's the discussion we haven't had since Toro threatened to sack us all.
Okay.
So if I could just maybe helpful if I can just come back to the legislation which says A, you must conduct a review.
Well, we've done that.
And B, you may make recommendations following the appointers may make recommendations following the review. So it is not within staff's jurisdiction to take the content of the review, I believe, and feed it back to this committee. I think it is.
Okay, we're
it
going
is a
to
job
argue about
be
this all day. It's time for a cup of tea, and we're going to stop for a cup of tea. I think we need a cup of tea, and then we're going to. Alex is going to. We're going to talk about the next paper.
Yep, let's move forward.
Gin, whiskey.
No, you can't. No, you can't.